He laughed before he even thought about it. Not loud, not ugly, just one of those quick little chuckles a man gives when he's sure you've got your facts wrong. It hit the air soft, but it hit me hard. "Ma'am," he said, still smiling like he was doing me a favor, "I see his mother-in-law every day. She just stepped out." The way he said it, easy, certain, made something inside me go still. Not fear, not panic, just that quiet shift a black woman feels in her spirit when something ain't sitting right. He had no attitude, no edge. He was just talking like he knew exactly who belonged in this building and who didn't. And according to him, that woman wasn't me. I didn't correct him, didn't ask him if he was sure. A woman my age learns how to stand still when the ground under her starts moving. I just nodded like I heard him. My heart tightened. "Anyway, my name is Samara Fielding, and before I tell you how deep this thing went, let me say this plain. I did not come here today looking for anybody's trouble. I only came to check on my son-in-law. But trouble has a way of standing right in front of women like me, even when we're minding our own business." He leaned on the booth window, comfortable. "Yes, ma'am. She comes here all the time. Tall lady, always dressed sharp." The words settled in my chest like a weight. I stepped aside and pretended to check my phone, just to breathe, for a second. Cars pulled in and out. People rushed to clock in. Everything around me moved normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. If you're still with me right now, go on and drop a little heart just so I know you hearing me, because what happened next took the breath right out of me. The guard straightened, suddenly, eyes lifting toward the doors. "There she go," he said quietly. "That's her right there." His voice had changed. Respectful now. I turned. A woman walked out of those glass doors like the whole building worked for her. Tall, clean, polished from head to toe. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice or look around to know everybody saw her. The front desk man rushed to hold the door. 2 employees stepped back, like they didn't want to be in her way. Even the guard adjusted his posture without meaning to. She didn't smile at anyone. She didn't nod. She didn't hesitate. She moved like somebody whose presence didn't need introduction. A black sedan rolled up smooth. Her driver stepped out quick, opened the door, and kept his eyes forward the whole time. The guard exhaled, almost under his breath. "Ma'am, that's the CEO's mother-in-law." The words didn't echo. They just landed, heavy and cold. I didn't gasp. I didn't blink. Older black women know how to hold themselves steady even when the truth hits crooked. The woman slipped into her car, and the door shut soft, like a secret closing itself. The sedan pulled away, and the air felt different after she left. Because whoever she was to my son-in-law, she wasn't pretending. Something was happening in broad daylight, right in front of this entire building, and I had just walked into the middle of it without knowing. I tightened my purse strap and told myself one thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't small, and it wasn't over. The woman's car disappeared past the gate, leaving only a faint hum in the air, one that did nothing to steady the prickle moving along my spine. I stood there a moment longer, pretending to admire the flowers bordering the walkway just to keep my breath from tripping over itself. The guard, Briggs, as I would later learn, kept glancing in my direction, suddenly unsure of how to look at me. He'd said something earlier that didn't match the man I knew, not the man my daughter married, not the man who stood in my living room with a polite smile and tired eyes. So I walked back toward the booth, slowly, quietly, as if I were approaching a skittish animal. Briggs stiffened when he saw me coming, his fingers tapping the counter, his eyes darting toward the CCTV camera fixed in the corner. "Ma, you're still here?" he asked, his voice now clipped and careful. "I didn't get your name," I said softly, keeping my tone warm, non-threatening, the same tone older women use when coaxing the truth from a child. "You can relax. I'm not here to cause trouble." He swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the gate again, then back to me. "Briggs, Ma." "Briggs," I repeated gently. "Let me ask you something small." His shoulders rose slightly, fear, not suspicion. A man who knows that certain truths can cost him more than his job. I rested my hand lightly on the counter. "That woman you pointed out earlier, who is she to my son-in-law?" Briggs inhaled through his nose, slow and tight. Whatever lived in his mind wasn't meant to be spoken aloud. His gaze moved to the ground, then up again, as if he was checking whether someone might hear us through concrete. "Ma, a beg? I no suppose talk too much," he murmured. "This place get plenty eyes." I stepped a little closer, keeping my voice calm. "You already said something that confused me. I only want clarity. I will not repeat anything you say." He hesitated, lips pressed together. Then he whispered, "That woman, she be lawyer mama, the lawyer way be CEO wife." The world didn't tilt. It didn't fall. It simply narrowed, tight and sharp, like someone pulling a string inside my chest. "The lawyer?" I asked quietly, carefully, not disbelief, not panic, just confirmation. Briggs nodded once, heavy and cautious. "Yes, Ma. Zarela Langford. She day work for company. People here. Everybody know her. Everybody respect am. Their family get hand for this place." A dull heat pulsed behind my ribs. Not anger, just the first sting of a truth I hadn't invited in. My daughter, Nerissa, had never mentioned any lawyer, any Langford, any marriage that didn't include her. She had only ever spoken about Dorian with a softness that made me believe their world was simple, safe. "Why are you uneasy?" I asked gently. "You seem afraid to talk." Briggs's eyes darted toward the camera again. His voice dropped lower. "Because this matter no be small," he said, "and some people fit lose job if them talk when them no suppose talk." There it was, the fear, not of gossip, not of confusion, but of a secret wrapped so tightly inside the walls of that glass building that even speaking around it felt dangerous. I kept my expression neutral, though a tremor moved quietly through my fingers. "How long has she been coming here?" "Long, Ma," he whispered, "before I even start work here. People fit count on one hand the days she no show. Everybody know her for this company." His voice cracked slightly at the end, not from nerves but from the weight of something he wished he'd never been pulled into. The morning air pressed heavier against my cheeks. The truth wasn't a storm. It was a slow leak, steady and suffocating. And this man, this guard who didn't know me at all, had seen enough pieces to understand the danger in assembling them. Briggs stepped closer, lowering his voice until it barely made it past his throat. "Ma, make I talk true?" he whispered. "Here, nobody—" He stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening at something behind me. A car pulling up, a movement by the glass doors. I didn't turn. I waited. When his gaze settled again, he leaned in, voice almost invisible. "Ma, nobody here knows anything about his life outside this company." I didn't drive straight home. I couldn't. My thoughts were too loud, too sharp, moving in tight circles that made my hands tremble on the steering wheel. So I checked into a hotel not far from Dorian's office, a quiet place with thick carpet, heavy curtains, and the kind of silence that forces a person to listen to what they'd rather ignore. The moment the door closed behind me, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. The room smelled faintly of lavender, but it didn't soften the memory of Briggs's whisper. Nobody here knows anything about his life outside this company. I opened my browser and typed slowly, carefully, county marriage records. A simple search, a public database, nothing complicated, but my thumb hesitated before tapping the screen, because whatever waited on that website had the power to collapse the world my daughter thought she lived in. The page loaded, a search bar, a small line asking for names. I typed Dorian Cade first. Alone. Nothing. Then I tried again. Cade, Dorian, still nothing. A trickle of relief tried to settle somewhere between my ribs, but it didn't hold. I typed slower this time, choosing to anchor myself in the truth instead of fear. Search alternate spellings. I didn't know why that line tugged at me, but it did, so I scanned every variation the database suggested. And then it appeared. Not under Cade, but under a legal name I had heard only once, quickly, on the day Nerissa said she'd seen it on an old document he kept put away. A name he never used publicly, a name he never allowed written on anything in our home. My stomach tightened. I clicked. A record opened, stamped, and verified. Marriage license number 8754 to 29. Applicant, Dorian J. K. Applicant, Zarela Langford. Marriage date, 2 years after my daughter's wedding. My eyes stung, but not with tears. With heat. With clarity. With a burn I couldn't swallow down, no matter how deeply I inhaled. I leaned forward, screen glowing against my palms. The dates lined up in a way that felt violent, clean, undeniable, intentional. He didn't stumble into a second life. He constructed it. A quiet sound escaped me, not a cry, but the kind of exhale a woman makes when truth knocks the air out of her. And then something else surfaced, slowly, painfully. A memory. Nerissa folding laundry with a small smile, holding her marriage certificate like it was a fragile piece of her heart. He said he'll keep the original in a safe place. Mom. Somewhere it can't get ruined. She had trusted that. She had trusted him. And he had taken advantage of that trust long before either of us realized what it cost. I pressed my hand against my knee until my fingers trembled. I knew what I needed to do, but the thought of it made the room feel smaller. Walking away from the bed, I set the phone on the desk like it was something that might scorch the sheets. The carpet cushioned my steps, but it didn't cushion the truth tightening behind my ribs. I sat, opened the laptop the hotel left in the drawer, and logged into the county website again. This time with purpose. The record stared back at me. Official. Stamped. Signed. Not a rumor. Not suspicion. Not Briggs's nervous whisper. Fact. My breath steadied. Not calm, just controlled enough to keep me from shaking as I clicked the small button at the bottom of the page. Request certified copy. A form opened. I typed each detail with precision, refusing to blink until the information was correct, refusing to let emotion guide my fingers. Name, address, purpose of request, delivery method, I hesitated only once, right before confirming the order. Not because I doubted what I saw, but because a part of me knew life before this moment wasn't coming back. I pressed submit. The screen flashed with confirmation. A door had opened, and whatever waited behind, it would not be gentle. I closed the laptop slowly. The room too quiet as one thought settled deep in my bones. The certified copy was on its way. The house was too quiet when I walked in that evening. Not peaceful quiet, waiting quiet like the air itself was listening. I placed my purse on the counter and stared at the living room door, knowing he'd be home soon. Knowing I would have to look Dorian in the eye with a truth he'd never expected me to hold. His car pulled into the driveway minutes later. I didn't sit. I didn't pace. I stood still, letting the weight settle fully in my chest. When the door opened and he stepped inside, he looked the same as always, pressed suit, tired eyes, the faint smell of cologne he wore for meetings, not for home. He forced a polite smile. "Ma, you're here." "I was in town," I answered, my voice even. "Wanted to see you." Something in his expression twitched, too fast, too small, but I caught it. He set his briefcase down carefully, like a man buying time without making it obvious. I didn't wait for him to settle. "Dorian," I said, "I need to talk to you about something important." His posture sharpened slightly. "Is Nerissa all right?" "She's fine," I replied. "This is about you." A beat passed, just one, but his shoulders tightened. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed version of the marriage record I'd found online, not the certified copy that hadn't arrived yet, just the digital one. I held it out calmly. "Can you explain this to me?" He didn't take it. He didn't even lean closer. He looked at it the way someone looks at heat, instinctively pulling back. "What is that supposed to be?" he asked. "A record," I said softly. "From the county." "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied quickly, too quickly. He walked past me into the kitchen, pretending to check the fridge. His movements were stiff, not natural. "You're misunderstanding something." I followed him with my eyes, not my feet. "Come and look at it, Dorian." He didn't. His back stayed turned. When he finally closed the fridge door, he didn't meet my gaze. "Those online things are not always accurate," he muttered. "No one's asking you to confirm the internet," I said, still calm. "I'm asking why another marriage record exists with your name on it." His jaw moved once, tight. He turned toward me with a smile stretched too thin. "You're reading too much into something you don't understand. Nerissa probably told you about my legal name. Sometimes government databases mix things up." His defensiveness came sharp, like he'd rehearsed it somewhere in the shadows of his mind. I placed the paper on the counter between us. "Dorian," I said quietly, "look at it." He didn't move. I watched his throat tighten, watched his hands press against the counter as if grounding himself, watched the calm he wore like a suit begin to crack at the seams. "What were you doing near the company anyway?" he asked, suddenly changing direction. His voice held a hard edge. "You shouldn't just show up places like that." There it was, the shift. Not curiosity, not innocence, control. He only looked at me after those words left his mouth, and when he did, something guarded flickered in his eyes. His face stayed neutral, but his fingers tapped the counter the way Briggs tapped the security booth desk when he was nervous. I stepped closer. Not threatening, just deliberate. "You're deflecting." He scoffed under his breath, dismissive. I don't have time for this. You're avoiding the record. There is no record. Then look at the paper. I don't need to look at anything. His irritation wasn't loud. It was precise. Tight. Rising from a place he didn't want touched. The more I pressed, the more the truth beneath his skin exposed itself. I didn't come here to fight you. I said softly, I came here to understand. His face hardened. The mask fell back into place. His voice dropped into something low and warning. Stop digging, he said sharply. You don't know what you're talking about. I left Dorian standing in that kitchen, his warning still hanging in the air like something sour. I didn't argue back. I didn't push. There are battles a mother loses by fighting too soon. Proof was on its way, and until it arrived, I needed to protect the one person who deserved the truth delivered gently, not like a knife. When I reached Nerissa's house that evening, the living room lights were off except for a lamp glowing in the corner. She sat curled on the couch, her head resting against the cushion, a blanket wrapped around her legs even though the room wasn't cold. The television played softly, but she wasn't watching it. She looked tired, a kind of tired that didn't come from work or errands, a tired that lived behind the eyes. Mom, she said, sitting up quickly, adjusting the blanket. You didn't tell me you were coming back. I forced a small smile and took a seat beside her. I wanted to check on you. She rubbed her forehead and gave a soft laugh. I'm fine. Just a long week. Dorian's been busy. I'm trying not to take it personal. The way she said it made my chest pinch. Something about her tone, gentle, apologetic, too forgiving, told me she'd been thinking that same line for days, maybe weeks. Is everything all right between you two? I asked carefully. She nodded immediately, too fast. Yes, of course. He's stressed, that's all. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and looked away. You know how demanding his job is. If he's distant sometimes, it's because he's trying to keep everything together. He works hard, Mom. The loyalty in her voice was soft and instinctive, the kind that grows from loving someone deeply, even when that love leaves bruises you pretend not to see. I know he works hard. I said gently, I'm just making sure you're okay. I am, she said again, but the words came out too light, too practiced. My gaze traveled over her face. There were shadows under her eyes, faint but real, the kind that come from nights spent waiting for footsteps that never arrive, or from pretending absence doesn't hurt. She hugged the blanket closer. Mom, did something happen? You look tense. I lowered my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath. Nothing happened. I just wanted to see you. I didn't mention the marriage record. I didn't mention the other woman walking out of that building. I didn't mention the way Dorian flinched when I confronted him. My daughter had the right to the truth, but not half-truths that could shatter her prematurely, until I held the certified copy in my hand. Until everything was irrefutable, I couldn't place that kind of weight on her chest. She exhaled slowly, leaning back into the couch. I know you worry, she said softly, but I'm okay, Mom. Really? Her voice trembled on the last word, not from fear, but from fatigue. I reached out and touched her hand. Her fingers were cool, her grip gentle. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. She just held on, the way a person holds on to something steady while standing on shifting ground. You've been quiet lately, I said softly. She gave a small shrug. Just life. She paused, looked down, then looked at me again, deeply, searchingly. Something flickered in her expression. Suspicion, concern, instinct. Mom, she whispered, her voice catching. Are you hiding something from me? I didn't sleep much that night. The hotel sheets felt too heavy, the room too still. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the marriage record again, 2 names tied together on paper, one belonging to a woman my daughter had never even heard of. By morning, my mind had settled into something sharper. Answers wouldn't come from sitting in a hotel room. They lived where all this began, inside the walls of Dorian's company. I changed into a simple dress, tied a scarf around my hair, and walked in like an older woman with no business other than minding her own. Harmless, polite, invisible if they wanted me to be. Briggs recognized me immediately. His hesitation flickered across his face before he forced a smile. Good morning, Ma. I nodded. I just want to look around. I won't bother anybody. He didn't question me. Maybe he felt guilty for what he'd already revealed. Maybe he simply didn't want to stand between me and whatever truth waited inside. The lobby doors slid open, and the cold air of conditioned corporate air hit my face. Everything inside gleamed. White marble floors, glass walls, gold accents. Employees moved quickly, purposeful, not wasting steps. They belonged here. I moved slower, taking in details the way a mother takes in changes in her child's voice. A receptionist behind the desk looked up. Good morning, ma'am. Are you here to see someone? I'm visiting, I said with a gentle smile. Just looking around. She returned the smile, polite, distracted. All right, Mrs. Cade. Mrs. CEO was here earlier, so you just missed her. The words didn't hit like a blow. They landed softer, quiet but deadly, like a slow leak that floods the floor before you notice the water rising. Mrs. CEO, I repeated softly. Yes, the receptionist said, typing something. She and Mr. Cade attended the Lagos Leadership Forum last weekend. They're hosting the follow-up event next quarter. She said it so casually, so comfortably, that for a moment I felt like I was the one intruding on someone else's life. I stepped aside, letting 2 employees pass. Their conversation floated through the air. Zarila approved it. You know she doesn't like last-minute changes. Tell me about it. At least the CEO listens to her. Their voices faded down the hallway. I stood still, letting their words settle over me. Zarila wasn't a rumor. She wasn't a secret. She wasn't an accident. She was woven into this company like thread into fabric. I walked slowly toward the waiting area, passing staff members who nodded politely. None of them looked confused to see me. None of them seemed unsure of who I was. They thought I was her, the mother of the lawyer wife, the woman they knew, the woman whose presence meant power. I took a seat near a glass wall overlooking a courtyard. Employees stepped outside to eat, laugh, stretch their legs. A man wearing a company badge greeted someone warmly. How's Mrs. Langford today? Doing well. She left about an hour ago. Their familiarity with her name stung. Not because I envied it, but because it proved something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't new. This wasn't temporary. This was a world built around her. Not my daughter. And certainly not me. A soft ache moved through my chest, not loud enough to break anything, but deep enough to remind me that truth can feel like grief long before it becomes anger. I stood and wandered toward a quiet hallway lined with bulletin boards. Company notices, training schedules, team photos, charity event posters, all bright and organized. Then I saw it, a glossy event flyer pinned neatly in the center of the board. The Cade Langford Gala, hosted by CEO Dorian Cade and attorney Zarela Langford. Their photos sat side by side, professional, smiling, polished. His hand rested lightly against her back. Their names intertwined like they belonged together. My feet stopped moving. My breath tightened. The hallway's hum fell away until only one truth remained standing in front of me. Everyone in this building knew a life my daughter didn't even know existed. I stared at the flyer, the edges blurring as the realization settled. This company had only ever known one wife, and it wasn't Nerissa. Verity Langford's home sat behind tall iron gates, the kind that opened only after a camera decided you belonged on the other side. The driveway curved like a ribbon toward a stone house that looked more like an inheritance than a residence. I sat in my car for a moment after the gates closed behind me, letting the atmosphere settle across my chest. This was the world Dorian had stepped into, structured, polished, powerful, and fully claimed by a family my daughter knew nothing about. A maid opened the front door before I even reached the steps. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Mrs. Langford is expecting no visitors today. I won't take much of her time," I said quietly. The maid hesitated, then stepped aside. The entryway swallowed me whole. Dark wood gold accents, art that spoke of generations of wealth. Even the air smelled expensive, like aged books and delicate perfume. "Mrs. Langford," the maid called gently. Verity appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a satin blouse the color of champagne. Her gaze swept over me from a distance, measured, guarded, the kind of gaze women like her perfected to remind the world they were not easily impressed. She descended the stairs with the grace of someone who controlled every room she entered. "I don't believe we've met," she said, tone cool but polite. "We haven't," I replied. "My name is." She lifted a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "Before you introduce yourself, tell me why you're in my home." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Pride did its own speaking. I steadied my breath. "This is about your daughter. And about Dorian." The muscles in her jaw shifted faintly, just one twitch, but I saw it. She motioned toward the sitting room, her heels clicking softly on marble floors. The room was arranged with surgical precision, pillows aligned, candles untouched, magazines placed like props. She sat. I remained standing. "My daughter's marriage is solid," she said calmly, "and Dorian has been nothing but respectful to our family. Whatever you believe you've discovered, you're mistaken." Her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the kind of certainty that comes from believing you made the right choices for your child. "I'm not here to attack your family," I said softly. "I'm here because two marriages cannot exist quietly without one of them being a lie." Her eyes hardened, but she didn't flinch. "You're implying something quite serious." "I'm stating something that needs clarity." She crossed her legs, leaning back slightly. "Who are you exactly?" "I'm the mother of his first wife," I answered. Stillness fell over the room, clean, sharp. For a moment, she didn't blink. Then she laughed, a thin, controlled sound. "Dorian has no other wife." "He does." "He does not." Her dismissiveness wasn't cruel. It was instinct. The only shield she had against a truth that could dismantle everything she'd built for her daughter. I opened my purse slowly, carefully, and pulled out the printed copy of the marriage record. Not the certified one, just the first copy I'd found. I placed it on the glass table between us. Her eyes remained on me, not the paper. "Please," I said quietly, "just look at the date." She didn't reach for it. Instead, she folded her arms, her expression almost pitying. "I don't indulge in fabrications," she said. "People falsify documents every day. My daughter's marriage is recognized, respected, and legal. Whatever this is, it is not real." "It is real," I whispered. She looked down then, briefly. Her gaze skimmed across the paper, but she didn't touch it, didn't study it, didn't allow herself to process what it meant. Her chin lifted again, her composure locking back into place. "Thank you for coming," she said flatly, "but I will not entertain this." I held her gaze, not with anger but with the quiet certainty of someone who's seen enough to stop doubting herself. "You will?" I murmured. "Maybe not today, but you will." Her face didn't break. Her voice didn't shake, but her fingers tightened around the armrest for half a second before she released it. "Please leave my home," she said. I stood, purse in hand, leaving the marriage certificate on her table, and she still refused to believe it. The silence in Verity Langford's sitting room felt colder after she asked me to leave, as if the air itself had turned against anything that didn't match her version of reality. I didn't move right away. I allowed the quiet to settle, watching her posture, the way she leaned back slightly, as if distance alone could protect her from what I'd placed on the table. "Mrs. Langford," I said softly, "I didn't come here to start a war." Her eyes cut through the space between us. "Yet that is exactly what you're doing." It wasn't anger in her voice. Not yet. It was something firmer, something older. Pride carved into bone. A mother who had built her daughter's life like a carefully arranged house and did not appreciate someone shaking the foundation. "This isn't a lie," I continued. "The record is real. It is fabricated." Her voice remained steady. False information spreads easily, especially when jealousy is involved. Jealousy, the word hung in the air, almost out of place, but effective. She wanted me small, uncertain, easier to dismiss. "I gain nothing from bringing this to you," I replied, "but you lose everything if you ignore it." Her lips pressed together, the faintest tremor running through the muscles in her jaw. Not fear of me, but fear of what believing me could cost her. Her daughter's marriage, her reputation, the entire image she had fought to uphold. "I'd built my daughter's future with intention," she said, her tone softening but not warming. "I would not have allowed her to marry a man who came with hidden attachments. Dorian has been transparent with us from the beginning." Transparent. The word twisted inside me, sharp enough to draw breath from my lungs. She finally looked at the paper again, but only with the edge of her gaze, never fully committing her eyes to the truth printed on it. "The dates are wrong," she insisted, "or forged, or simply misinterpreted. People make errors." "Not on marriage records," I said quietly. Her chin lifted a fraction, as if the ceiling suddenly interested her more than the messy fall of reality settling around her feet. "You are mistaken." A softer expression passed over her face, one I hadn't expected. Not empathy, not doubt, fear. The fear of being wrong. The fear of realizing she had chosen a son-in-law who could betray her daughter just as smoothly as he betrayed mine. The fear of losing control. I saw it, even if she refused to let it surface. But the moment flickered and vanished, swallowed back into the structure of her pride. She stood, smoothing her blouse with a practiced elegance. I won't entertain this. I understand your loyalty to your daughter, I said, rising with her. I understand wanting to protect her. She didn't answer. But your loyalty doesn't erase facts, I added gently. She inhaled through her nose. Slow, deep, steady. My daughter's marriage is legitimate. Mine is too, I said. That stopped her for half a second. Her eyes narrowed, not in hostility but in calculation. My words had shifted something, just a hairline crack, but her pride sealed it back almost instantly. She walked toward the doorway, signaling the conversation was over. Her heels made soft echoes across marble, each one hitting the ground with more finality than the last. I followed quietly, studying the art lining the walls, portraits of ancestors, bold colors, history heavy with expectation. This was not a family accustomed to being questioned. At the doorway, she turned to me, posture tall, chin high. I do not know what you hope to achieve with this, she said, but you are the one who will be disappointed. That depends, I replied softly, on how long the truth can survive under denial. Her expression tightened, not in anger, but in something dangerously close to hurt. Her eyes flicked briefly to the paper still lying untouched on the table behind us, as if part of her wanted to go back and check it again. But she didn't. She clung to the structure she knew best. Leave my family alone, she said. Verity Langford was the kind of woman who could hold a room steady just by lifting her chin. But when I left her house that day, leaving the marriage record on her glass table, I knew something had pierced her composure, something she wasn't ready to name. Women like her don't break loudly. They unravel in silence, and they investigate with precision. I didn't hear from her for 2 days, but I knew she hadn't let it go. Somewhere between her pride and her instincts, a storm had started brewing. On the morning of the 3rd day, while I sat in my hotel room waiting for the certified marriage copy to arrive, I pictured her navigating the truth the only way a powerful woman knows how. Quietly, Verity wouldn't gossip. She wouldn't confront her daughter. She wouldn't alert Dorian. She would go straight to the sources that owed her answers. I imagined her in her home office, surrounded by tidy rows of leather-bound files and investment documents, dialing numbers that most people would never be allowed to access. And she would keep her voice calm. She always did. Please confirm, for me, the date of the ceremony, she might have said. Silence on the other end. Then a quiet response. A date. The same one written on the copy I left on her table. Her heart would have paused, just once, before resuming its steady rhythm. She would have ended the call politely, even as her fingers trembled. Next, she would have reached out to someone else, the financial advisor who handled her daughter's prenup, the one she crafted herself to protect her daughter from unforeseen risks. Verity believed in structure, protection, preparedness, but nothing in that prenup mentioned another legal wife. She would have reviewed the file line by line, scanning the financial disclosures Dorian had submitted, income statements, assets, business ventures, liabilities. And she would have seen it then. The gap, not large enough to raise suspicion before. But now that she knew where to look, it was impossible to ignore. Inconsistencies. Amounts shifted. A trail of transactions that didn't match his declared assets. He had duplicated expenses, 2 households tucked neatly into one man's income, 2 women, 2 lives, 2 complete financial structures hidden in plain sight. Verity would have realized slowly and painfully that she hadn't been outsmarted by love. She had been played by ambition. Dorian didn't only deceive her daughter. He deceived her, the woman whose name held weight in business corridors, whose investments held companies steady, whose influence could lift or drown a man's career. Her hands would have stilled on the paperwork, and the denial she clung to so tightly, the denial she used to send me out of her house, would have cracked clean through, because facts don't bend for pride. They simply wait for a person to stop lying to themselves. That afternoon, as rain tapped lightly against my hotel window, my phone buzzed once, vibrating across the wooden desk. I didn't rush to pick it up. Something in the air felt shifted, almost heavy. When I glanced at the screen, a private number glowed in the quiet room. I answered. Silence settled first. Not the kind that hides confusion. The kind that comes after truth forces a person to breathe differently. Then her voice arrived. Steady, controlled, stripped of every layer of pride she wore like armor. Mrs. Fielding? Yes, I said, keeping my voice calm. Another pause. A long one. A weighted one. Her next words were quiet, but they carried the full force of a woman who had seen what she refused to believe 2 days earlier. We need to talk. Verity Langford didn't choose a neutral place to meet. She chose my hotel, quiet, discreet, the kind of setting where truth could unfold without witnesses. She arrived earlier than she said she would, sitting alone in the lounge when I came downstairs. Her posture was still perfect, but something in her eyes had shifted. The sharpness was gone. What remained was the fragile steadiness of someone holding pain close to the skin. She stood when she saw me, but her voice didn't carry the confidence she'd worn in her home. Mrs. Fielding, thank you for agreeing to this. I nodded. You called. I came. We sat across from each other, the table between us small enough that neither of us could avoid the weight in the other's gaze. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and brewing coffee, but beneath it lived something heavier, quiet heartbreak. Verity rested her hands in her lap, fingers clasped tightly. I owe you an apology, she said softly. I dismissed you. I shouldn't have. Her voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't dramatic. It was something worse, controlled. Controlled in a way people sound when they're trying not to fall apart in public. I understand why you reacted the way you did. I replied, no mother wants to imagine her child living a lie. She blinked slowly, inhaling through her nose. I verified everything. The dates, the filings, the signatures. A small tremor rippled through her throat. 2 marriages, legally recognized, both with my daughter's husband. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. When they opened again, I no longer saw the wealthy matriarch who dismissed me with elegance. I saw a mother, just a mother, hurt, blindsided, and trying to regain control over a situation she never expected. I raised my daughter to choose wisely, she whispered. I believed I guided her well, but I didn't see this. She exhaled slowly. I didn't even sense it. Her vulnerability didn't soften her dignity. If anything, it made her humanity sharper, realer. I leaned forward slightly. We were both deceived. Both our daughters were lied to. None of this is your failure. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something deeper, humiliation. A woman who had built her image brick by brick suddenly realizing one man had used that image as a ladder. He came to us polished, she said, ambitious, respectful. He spoke about your daughter as if she were part of his past, not his present. He said their marriage was short-lived, that they ended things mutually. She shook her head faintly. I believed him. The words cut into both of us. I didn't react loudly. I simply let them settle inside me. Nerissa, the woman who still waited for his footsteps at night, had been reduced to a footnote in his quest for status. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, dense with two women sitting in the wreckage of a shared betrayal. I'm not here for revenge, I said, my voice low. I'm here for truth, for my daughter's safety, for her dignity. Verity looked up sharply, meeting my gaze with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. So, am I? There it was. Not an alliance born from strategy, not from convenience, but from pain, equal pain. She reached for her bag, slow, deliberate, and placed something gently on the table. A thick folder, dark blue, official. My eyes fell on it, but I didn't touch it. Verity kept one hand resting on top of it, grounding herself. This, she said quietly, is the contract my family signed with him. Her voice had no pride left, only truth. She slid it slightly toward me. The investment that built his position came with a condition. She paused. Her voice softened, almost breaking. A condition he violated before it even began. Verity lifted her hand from the folder, letting it rest between us. The investment contract that tied the marriage together. The folder sat between us like something alive, something that carried too much weight to touch carelessly. Verity's fingers lingered near the edge for a moment before she finally nudged it toward me. I opened it slowly, as if each page might reveal a new kind of betrayal. Inside lay the investment agreement, thick, neatly typed, stamped, notarized. The kind of document that didn't leave room for misunderstanding. Verity leaned closer, not to supervise, but because reading it again hurt less when someone else was witnessing it with her. This is what he signed, she said quietly. This is the foundation of his entire position. The first page outlined the purpose. Financial backing from the Langford family to help stabilize the company during its restructuring phase. An investment large enough to secure her daughter's future. And in return, a clause underlined in bold ink. Marriage to Zarela Langford was required before the funds could be released. Required, not suggested, not encouraged, mandatory. My stomach tightened. Dorian hadn't stumbled into that marriage. He had built it like a business strategy. Verity watched my face as I read. Her expression was restrained, but the pain beneath it pulsed, sharp, quiet, unwavering. This wasn't arranged, she said. He pursued her. He courted her. He made himself indispensable. He presented himself as a man ready to commit his entire life to her. And all the while, I murmured, he was already married to my daughter. She nodded once, a short, weighted movement. He lied to both households. He created two worlds and expected both to hold. I flipped another page. There were financial breakdowns, projections, partnership commitments, all tied to the Langford name. Everything he'd become inside that company could be traced back to this agreement. Without it, he would never have risen fast enough to reach the position he held now. This is more than betrayal. I said quietly, this is architecture. Verity's voice dropped lower. It is greed. Nothing else. The more I read, the clearer it became. Dorian wasn't living a double life by accident or impulse. He had engineered himself into two families with the precision of someone who never expected either one to look behind him. He used my daughter's loyalty. He used Verity's influence. He used their trust as leverage to climb higher. My chest tightened with a slow, unfamiliar ache, not anger, but recognition. The moment when a mother realizes her child's pain wasn't caused by weakness or miscommunication, but by someone else's calculation. I set the contract down. He didn't love either of them. Verity's lips trembled before she steadied them. He loved what they offered. Silence settled between us. Not empty silence, but the kind that binds two women in a shared wound. I saw her differently now, not as the wealthy matriarch whose pride had once dismissed me, but as a mother sitting in the same devastation I'd been living with since the moment Briggs pointed out the wrong mother-in-law. She reached into the folder and pulled out another document, an amendment dated months after the initial agreement. Read this part. I scanned the page. The words pressed against me harder than the last ones. Disclosure of any prior or existing marriage required before the union. My breath stilled. He had signed that without hesitation, without honesty, without conscience. Verity's voice cracked for the first time. He knew. He knew this clause existed, and he still walked my daughter down an aisle. The realization hit her again as she closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something colder lived there, a steadiness born from clarity. She looked at me with a heaviness that dissolved whatever distance once stood between us. There is more at stake than our daughters' hearts, she said. His entire position, his authority, his salary, his board seat, all of it rests on this contract. I held her gaze, absorbing every word. If the board sees this violation, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, he's finished. The boardroom wasn't designed for chaos. It was designed for decisions, quiet, powerful ones made behind polished wood and thick glass. Verity and I entered together, walking through the hush of an empty hallway toward the room where Dorian's future would unravel. She wore a navy suit that masked any trace of the turmoil inside her. I wore calm like armor. The board members were already seated when we stepped in. Men and women in tailored suits, expressions carved by years of responsibility. The air smelled faintly of paper and faintly of threat. Verity took the lead, as she should. This was her territory. She placed the folder, the contract, the breach, the records on the center of the table. The sound was quiet, but it landed heavily, drawing every eye. "Thank you for meeting with us," Verity said, her tone steady, her posture tall. The woman who once dismissed me now stood beside me as if she had always known our paths would cross this way. A board member named Clark, an older man with silver at his temples, leaned forward. We were told this was urgent. "It is," Verity said. "What we are about to show you concerns the integrity of this company's leadership." The room stilled. I watched their faces as she opened the folder, revealing the investment contract first. No dramatic gestures, no theatrics, just truth placed on a table that had carried too many decisions to be surprised by one more. "This agreement," she said, was the basis of Dorian Cade's elevation to CEO. The Langford family invested significantly, with one condition clearly outlined. She tapped the section requiring marriage to Zarela, and he met it. Clark said, Verity slid the county marriage record forward. He met it after marrying another woman. A ripple crossed the room, quiet but unmistakable. One board member adjusted her glasses. Another exchanged a glance with a colleague. The sound of papers shifting carried a kind of disbelief that didn't need words. He concealed a prior marriage at the time he signed the agreement. Verity continued, a direct violation of Clause 4. I placed the certified copy of the first marriage beside the second. Dates aligned like a confession. Neither of us owed them, but brought anyway. Clark exhaled slowly. This is serious. It is more than serious, Verity said. It is deliberate deception. It compromises the company's credibility and exposes us to legal risk. A woman at the far end of the table, sharp-eyed, controlled, spoke next. We've had concerns about his conduct recently. He has been territorial, secretive. Another board member nodded reluctantly. There were discrepancies in recent financial reports. Small ones, but unusual. The pieces clicked louder than words. Dorian had not only lied to two families, he had let traces of that double life seep into the corners of the company he controlled. Clark lifted the contract again, staring at the violation clause with growing clarity. This is a breach, he said. Undeniable. Verity's voice softened. Not weak, but steady with purpose. My daughter married a man who never intended to honor her. Mrs. Fielding's daughter married a man who erased her. Both women deserve protection, and this company deserves leadership that isn't built on deception. The room grew heavy. Decisions like this never came with shouting. They came with silence, the kind people sit in when the truth leaves no space for argument. Minutes stretched. Eyes moved across documents. Pages turned. No one talked over anyone else. Power didn't need volume here. Finally, Clark placed the papers down and folded his hands. We cannot keep a CEO whose position was secured through fraudulent disclosure. Another board member added quietly, and whose personal conduct undermines corporate ethics. The decision formed not from outrage, but from inevitability. The board members exchanged one last round of weighted glances, each nod carrying the weight of consequence. Clark looked at Verity, then at me, then at the folder between us. Effective immediately, he said, we remove him from his position. The truth never walks into a room gently. It arrives like a change in air pressure, quiet, undeniable, heavy enough to bend breath. When Verity and I parted ways after the board meeting, we agreed on one thing without speaking it aloud. Our daughters could not hear this from anyone else. The first conversation happened in Nerissa's living room. Soft light, drawn curtains, a silence heavy enough to muffle even the sound of our breathing. She sat across from me, hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes searched my face with the kind of fear children have before a parent speaks news that can't be undone. Mom, she whispered, what's wrong? Not dramatic, not suspicious, just deeply tired. I placed the certified marriage copy on the table between us. She didn't reach for it at first, her eyes fixed on the corner of the paper, afraid of what it could mean. Nerissa, I said gently, you need to see this. Her fingers shook as she pulled it closer. She read the names, the date, The signature. The room shifted around her, slow at first, then sharply. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs, and for a few seconds she couldn't speak. He was already my husband, she whispered, voice cracking on the last word. Before this, he was already my husband. Tears didn't fall immediately. They gathered quietly, pressing against her eyes, as if waiting for permission. Then she folded over herself, face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking in small, controlled tremors. Every moment she had spent defending him. Every night she waited for him to come home. Every soft doubt she swallowed. All of it collapsed into understanding. I thought I was doing something wrong, she choked out. I thought I was the reason he kept slipping away. I reached for her hand, not to pull her up, but to anchor her enough to breathe. She leaned her head against my shoulder the way she used to when she was little and storms frightened her. Only this storm lived inside her now. We stayed like that until her breathing steadied, slow and hollow. When it was time to leave, she didn't ask what would happen next. She simply said, "Thank you for telling me," in a voice that held equal parts heartbreak and relief. The second conversation unfolded miles away in Verity's mansion, a home too quiet to hold the kind of truth we carried. Zarela sat on a cream couch, legs folded beneath her, waiting the moment she saw her mother's face. She wasn't naive. She wasn't fragile. But she knew enough to recognize when something inside a parent has broken. "What is it, Mom?" she asked softly. Verity sat beside her, not with the posture of a matriarch or an investor. She sat as a mother who had run out of places to hide her grief. She placed the contract breach and the 2 marriage records on the table. Zarela stared at them without touching them. At first, she blinked. Then she swallowed. Then she looked at her mother, as if the truth needed confirmation from the only person she trusted completely. "No," she whispered. Verity didn't answer. She didn't need to. Zarela leaned back slowly, her breath leaving her body in a long, trembling exhale. Her eyes glistened, but she held herself together, not with pride, but with training. She pressed a hand to her mouth, the sound she made too soft for agony but too deep for denial. "All this time," she murmured. Verity placed a hand on her daughter's knee. "He deceived both families," she said quietly. "You did nothing wrong." Zarela nodded slowly, though confusion twisted across her features. Confusion, hurt, disbelief. For a long moment, she stared at the documents again, her jaw tightening, her composure unraveling thread by thread. Then she looked up at Verity with a voice that barely made it past her lips. "Mom, what do we do now?" The fallout didn't arrive with headlines or shouting. It arrived with signatures, emails, and silence. Corporate silence, legal silence, the kind of silence that drowns a man more effectively than noise ever could. The board's decision hit Dorian before he could pretend to brace for it. By noon the next day, the company released an internal memo. Effective immediately, Dorian Cade is removed from his position as CEO. There was no explanation in the memo. They didn't owe him one. Security escorted him from the building, quiet, efficient. No scene. Just a man walking out of the place he fought to own, his badge deactivated before he reached the door. At the same hour, Verity's attorneys delivered notice to the financial department. Her investments were frozen. The Langford family pulled out of every partnership tied to Dorian. Anything with his name attached stalled like a machine losing electricity. Then came the legal filings. 2 sets, 2 households, 2 truths finally forced into daylight. The Langfords pursued annulment, clean, swift, undisputed. Their lawyers worked with the precision of surgeons, removing her daughter from the binding contract with no hesitation. For my daughter, it wasn't annulment. It was divorce, real, painful, honest. But she filed it with a steadiness that surprised even me. "He doesn't get another chance to speak into my life," Nerissa said softly, handing the paperwork back to her lawyer. Her voice didn't tremble. Not once. Outside, the world moved as usual. But inside every office connected to Dorian, every meeting room, every staff conversation, something shifted. His name grew heavier. His reputation shrank. His 2 lives began collapsing in on themselves like a structure built on hollow beams. By afternoon, his phone began ringing first to the Langfords. No answer. Then to the board. No answer. Then to my daughter. She was in her living room, holding a cup of tea she hadn't touched when his name flashed across her screen. She stared at it for a long second, long enough to reclaim her breath, then pressed block with a calm, steady finger. Not anger, not revenge, just closure. The next attempt came through a withheld number. She denied it without checking. By the 3rd try, she had handed me her phone. I don't want his voice in this house. So I kept it with me. When evening settled, soft and blue, I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, the same bed where this journey began, and watched the light fade across the carpet. My thoughts were quiet, steady, not triumphant, not vengeful, just grounded in the truth that women like us rarely get justice this clean. The phone vibrated again. Once, twice, a 3rd time, a private number. My breath stayed even as I answered. There was no greeting on the other end, just a sharp inhale, followed by a trembling voice that barely held itself together. "Please," Dorian whispered, "don't hang up." I didn't speak. Silence was the only power I owed him. He let out a shuddering breath. "They're ruining me, the board, her family, everyone. Please tell them I'm not a bad man." His words tumbled out, desperate, cracked, frantic. Tears softened his voice until it sounded like someone drowning in his own consequences. "Please," he repeated, breath hitching, "tell them I'm not." I ended the call, not out of anger, not out of satisfaction, out of something deeper, the understanding that saving him was never my role. He had built 2 worlds. He had broken 2 daughters. He had betrayed 2 mothers. And now he would face life with only one truth left, the truth he created himself. The moment the call disconnected, the room went still again, waiting for the final reckoning. The sky was pale when I arrived at the company gates again, the kind of morning light that softens everything except the truth. I hadn't planned on returning, not after everything that unfolded, but something inside me needed to close the circle where it began, where a guard laughed, where a lie greeted me before I even stepped inside. Briggs was at his post, leaning over a small thermos of tea. The moment he looked up and saw me walking toward him, he straightened, fully, respectfully, like a man acknowledging someone whose presence carried weight now. "Good morning, Ma," he said, not casual, not dismissive, steady. I nodded. "Good morning, Briggs." He hesitated, then stepped outside the booth, wiping his hands nervously on his uniform pants. The gesture wasn't fear this time. It was regard. a quiet apology he didn't know how to shape with words. I heard everything he said softly about what'd happen inside, about Olga stepping down. His voice held no satisfaction, just the sober tone of someone who'd seen too much unravel too quickly. "Thank you," I replied, "for speaking when you didn't have to." He lowered his gaze. "Sometimes truth day heavy, ma, but it still need to come out." Behind him, the building stood taller than I remembered, not because it had changed, but because I had. The polished glass, the marble floors beyond the lobby, the quiet hum of business, they no longer felt impenetrable. They felt like a world that had simply never been meant for lies. I didn't ask to go inside. I didn't need to. I only stepped close enough to take one last look through the glass doors. Staff moved through the lobby, focused, swift, purposeful, but the energy was different now. More grounded, less staged. The shadow of a double life had lifted, leaving behind only the truth people were finally allowed to see. 2 women had made that happen. My mind drifted to Verity, not the proud woman who dismissed me that first day, but the one who sat across from me with trembling breath, folding her pride neatly beside her pain. We stood on opposite sides of the world, yet walked the same road when the truth cracked our daughters' lives in the same place. Not allies, not friends, something cleaner, something earned. 2 mothers who stripped a lie down to its bones. I imagined her this morning, calm, composed, navigating her mansion with the quiet dignity she always carried. But now that dignity belonged to honesty, not denial. It looked different on her, softer, stronger, real. Briggs cleared his throat gently. "Ma, you want to sit small? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. I stood there a little longer, letting the memory of everything that happened settle exactly where it belonged. Not as a wound, not as triumph, but as closure. Clean, honest, final. A car pulled up, dropping off a group of employees. They glanced at me, offering small, respectful nods. They didn't recognize me as the woman who'd once been mistaken for someone else. They recognized something in my posture, now resolution. Briggs looked at me again. "If you need anything, you fit always pass here. I day for you." His sincerity warmed me more than the morning sun. "Thank you," I murmured. Then I stepped back from the entrance, not retreating, not avoiding, simply choosing my direction with clarity. There was nothing left here for me, nothing left to uncover, nothing left to fear. The truth had done its work. The 2 worlds Dorian built had already fallen apart, and I had watched every crack without lifting a single destructive hand. I walked back toward the gate, my steps steady, my breath calm. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, the quiet chatter of employees arriving, the soft scrape of Briggs returning to his booth. And for the first time since this began, the air felt light. I reached the sidewalk, paused, and let the moment settle inside me like a final chapter closing on its own. Then I walked away quietly, thinking, some men destroy themselves. All you have to do is step aside,